In 1870s to 1890s London, baby farmers like Amelia Dyer murdered hundreds of infants for profit. Unmarried mothers paid weekly fees for childcare. Farmers pocketed money while killing babies through starvation, poisoning, or strangulation. Dyer strangled infants with white edging tape, wrapped bodies in weighted carpet bags, and dumped them in the Thames. Police recovered packages containing tiny corpses, some decomposed beyond recognition. Autopsies showed infants had empty stomachs and ligature marks. Dyer's property excavation uncovered infant bones in the garden, lime pits in the basement. She likely killed 400-plus babies over 30 years. Other baby farmers used laudanum overdoses, slowly poisoning infants while telling mothers they were sickly. Margaret Waters starved 19 babies, feeding them only bread soaked in water. Neighbors complained of constant infant wailing, then suspicious silence. The 1872 Infant Life Protection Act attempted regulation, but enforcement was minimal. Trials revealed farmers advertised adoption for one-time fees, guaranteeing childless futures for desperate women. Dyer was hanged in 1896, unrepentant, having made a profitable career from infanticide, one of history's most prolific serial killers. From the 15th to 19th centuries, syphilis treatment involved mercury application, resulting in mercury poisoning as deadly as the disease. Doctors prescribed mercury vapor baths, mercury pills, and mercury ointment rubbed into lesions. Patients developed mercurial tremors, loose teeth that fell out, and metallic saliva that destroyed mouth tissues. The phrase "mad as a hatter" originated from hatmakers' mercury exposure causing neurological damage, slurred speech, personality changes, hallucinations. Syphilis patients endured similar fates. Treatment involved salivation therapy. Patients were enclosed in heated boxes with mercury vapor until they produced over a quart of mercury-contaminated saliva daily, believed to purge disease. Instead, it caused kidney failure, brain damage, and death. Autopsy reports show mercury deposits throughout organs. Livers turned black. Kidneys crystallized. Many patients chose untreated syphilis over mercury torture. The treatment persisted because temporary improvement occurred from mercury's antibacterial properties before inevitable poisoning. One saying captured the grim irony: a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. The practice finally ended with penicillin's discovery in 1943, but thousands died from the cure. Before the guillotine, Halifax, England used a primitive beheading machine from 1286 to 1650. The Halifax gibbet featured a 7.5-pound axe blade dropping from 13 feet along wooden grooves. Unlike later designs, the blade was dull and square-edged, requiring multiple drops to sever heads. Executioners reset it repeatedly while condemned prisoners remained pinned beneath. Records describe one execution requiring 3 drops, the crowd watching the victims diminishing struggles. The blade was raised by rope. If the condemned stole cloth, the cloth's owner would cut the rope, making victims of property crime executed by their victims. Excavations at Gibbet Street uncovered 49 skulls, showing blade impact marks, some with incomplete cuts where additional blows were needed. The device was operated by untrained locals, resulting in misaligned strikes that split faces or shoulders instead of necks. 1:15:41 account describes a man surviving initial impact. The blade lodged in his spine, remaining conscious while the mechanism was reset. Blood grooves were carved in the platform, channeling flow toward collection buckets. The gibbet's last victim, Abraham Wilkinson, died in 1650 for stealing horses. In the 19th century, premature burial terror was so widespread that inventions like safety coffins with bell rope systems became commercial products. The fear had basis: catalepsy, comas, and poor death verification meant people were occasionally buried alive. George Washington requested a 3-day waiting period before his burial, fearing premature interment. Reports describe exhumed coffins with interior scratch marks, corpses found turned over, and splinters beneath fingernails. In 1896, T.M. Montgomery invented a coffin with a tube to the surface, equipped with a ladder, breathing apparatus, and signal system. Some systems included food and water compartments. Gravediggers reported hearing muffled screams and finding displaced coffin lids. The safety bell system, rope from coffin to above-ground bell, created graveyard shift employment, watchmen listening for bells. However, decomposition gases could ring bells, causing false alarms. Medical student Count Carnis Carnicki witnessed a young woman nearly buried alive, creating an elaborate coffin alarm system. Post-mortem examinations of rescued bodies showed many died from suffocation in coffins, confirming the nightmare. Embalming eventually solved the problem by ensuring death, though the Victorian fear persists culturally. During the American Civil War, surgeons amputated approximately 60,000 limbs, often without anesthesia due to supply shortages. Procedures took 10 minutes. Patients were held down by 4 men while surgeons sawed through bone with hacksaws, ligated arteries with unwashed silk threads, and sewed skin flaps over stumps. Survival rate was 75% for single amputations, dropping to 35% for multiple limbs. Amputation piles grew outside field hospitals. Mounds of arms and legs swarmed by flies, sometimes set ablaze while still fresh. Soldiers described the sound: constant screaming, bone sawing, and the wet thump of severed limbs hitting collection bins. Surgeons worked in blood-stiffened aprons, using the same unwashed instruments on dozens of patients, spreading infection. Chloroform, when available, killed patients through overdose. No standardized dosing existed. Phantom limb pain tormented survivors, feeling itches and cramps in absent appendages. Photographs show surgeons posing proudly beside amputation piles like hunters with game. Some limbs were preserved in jars, displayed in medical museums. The Mutter Museum still exhibits Major General Daniel Sickles' shattered leg bone, donated by Sickles himself, who visited it annually. During 17th century plague outbreaks, physicians wore bird-like masks with 6-inch beaks filled with herbs, believing miasma, bad air, spread disease. The costume, leather overcoat, gloves, boots, and wide-brimmed hat, was supposed to protect them. It didn't. Plague doctors died at alarming rates, the costume providing zero actual protection against Yersinia pestis bacteria transmitted by fleas. They carried wooden canes to examine patients without touching them, often poking buboes, swollen lymph nodes, until they burst, spraying infectious material. Some filled beaks with laudanum-soaked sponges, keeping themselves sedated during rounds. The mask's glass eye covers fogged, forcing doctors to work partially blind. Records show many plague doctors were untrained, taking the job because qualified physicians fled. They performed treatments like bloodletting and lancing buboes, accelerating death. Autopsies on plague doctor remains show they contracted pneumonic plague, the airborne form, making their beak herbs utterly useless. The terrifying bird-masked figure became death's herald. Seeing one meant the plague had arrived and your neighborhood would soon fill with bodies. From the 13th to 17th centuries, European towns displayed criminals in gibbet cages, metal frameworks fitted to body dimensions hung from gallows. Prisoners weren't executed first. They were caged alive, dying from exposure, dehydration, and starvation over weeks. Crowds gathered to mock them, throwing stones and refuse. Bodies weren't removed after death, left to decompose as warnings. Bones would eventually fall through cage bars onto pathways below. Some cages were designed so heads protruded, allowing crows to peck at faces while victims still lived. Records describe prisoners begging for water, their tongues swollen black, voices reduced to croaks. In Münster, Germany, 3 Anabaptist leaders were caged atop St. Lambert's Church in 1536. Their cages still hang empty today. Skeletons from cage gibbeting show healed fractures that rebroke from confinement positions and teeth worn to nubs from grinding against metal bars. The practice declined when cities realized rotting corpses spread disease, but some cages remained displayed with skeletal remains until the 19th century. In 1846, the Donner Party became snowbound in the Sierra Nevada. Of 87 pioneers, 48 survived by cannibalizing 40 dead members. Stranded 5 months, they consumed leather, mice, bark, then corpses. Survivors described cutting flesh from frozen bodies, roasting it, and the metallic taste that haunted them forever. They avoided eating their own family members when possible, creating ghastly trading arrangements. Some victims were found with split skulls and empty craniums. Survivors had consumed brains. Children were fed without knowing the source, told it was beef. When rescuers arrived, they found corpses stacked like cordwood outside cabins. partially butchered, surrounded by human hair and bone fragments. One survivor, Louis Kesseberg, was found alone with mutilated bodies, claiming they were already dead, though evidence suggested otherwise. He was accused of murder cannibalism. The Breens, devout Catholics, refused cannibalism, suffering extreme starvation but surviving through willpower. Survivors rarely spoke publicly, traumatized by what hunger drove them to consume: friends, neighbors, and in some whispered cases, their own kin. Victorian medical schools required fresh cadavers, creating a lucrative corpse theft industry. Resurrection men robbed graves hours after burial, selling bodies for 5 to 10 pounds. They developed specialized techniques, digging at the head end to avoid heavy casket sections, using wooden tools to avoid metallic sounds, and replacing bodies with stones to maintain grave appearance. Some doctors partnered with undertakers who used false-bottomed coffins, retaining corpses while burying empty boxes. Families hired guards for first nights after burial, or installed mort safes, heavy iron cages over graves. The trade escalated to murder. The London Burkers killed at least 3 people in 1831, imitating Burke and Hare. Anatomists recognized fresh murder victims by warm bodies and lack of burial trauma, but asked no questions, desperate for specimens. The 1832 Anatomy Act ended the trade by allowing unclaimed bodies from workhouses and prisons to be used, but created horror among the poor that dying destitute meant dissection, a fate worse than paupers' graves. In 1820, the whaling ship Essex was rammed by a sperm whale sinking in the Pacific. 20 crew members escaped in 3 small boats with minimal provisions. After 2 months adrift, they resorted to cannibalism. When men died, survivors drank their blood immediately before coagulated, then dismembered bodies, consuming organs first for nutrients. After all dead were consumed, they drew lots to determine who would be killed. Owen Coffin, the captain's cousin, drew the fatal straw. He was shot, butchered, and eaten over 3 days. Rescuers found 8 survivors in 1821, emaciated, clutching gnawed bones. 2 men were discovered alone in their boat, surrounded by cracked open skulls and stripped skeletons, refusing rescue initially, guarding their provisions. They suffered permanent psychological damage. Survivors reported nightmares of endless hunger. Captain Pollard's account, suppressed for decades, detailed the precise taste and texture of human flesh. Herman Melville based Moby Dick on this event, though he sanitized the cannibalism aspects. In the 1920s, young women painting watch dials with radium-based luminous paint were instructed to lip-point brushes, using mouths to sharpen bristles. They ingested radium daily, their bodies becoming radioactive. Co-workers noticed they glowed in darkness. Hair, dresses, skin emitted eerie green light. Within years, their jaws disintegrated, teeth falling out in clumps. Bones fractured spontaneously as radiation destroyed skeletal structure. One woman's jaw was removed entirely. The bone crumbled in the surgeon's hands. Their breath was measurably radioactive. Catherine Donahue's body was exhumed in 1978, tissues still hot with radiation 40 years post-death. Companies denied culpability. Executives refused to hire male painters, claiming work was too delicate, knowing the danger. 5 radium girls sued in 1928, too ill to raise their arms for oath-taking, testimony conducted at their bedsides. They won, establishing workers' rights to sue employers for occupational diseases. Their skeletal remains are still too radioactive for safe handling, sealed in lead-lined coffins. In 1828 Edinburgh, William Burke and William Hare murdered 16 people to sell corpses to anatomy professor Robert Knox. Medical schools desperately needed bodies, offering 7 to 10 pounds per cadaver, more than a month's wages. Burke and Hare targeted the vulnerable, elderly lodgers, prostitutes, the disabled. They developed burking, suffocating victims by sitting on their chests while covering mouths and noses, leaving no marks. Knox asked no questions, dissecting bodies before identification was possible. Evidence suggests he recognized victims but continued purchasing. One corpse was Daft Jamie, a well-known 18-year-old with intellectual disabilities, whom students identified mid-dissection. When discovered, Burke was hanged. then publicly dissected, his skeleton still displayed at Edinburgh Medical School. His skin was tanned into leather, made into calling cards and bookbindings. Hare testified against Burke for immunity. Knox escaped prosecution, though his career collapsed. The murders prompted the 1832 Anatomy Act, legalizing body donation. Before embalming became standard, buried bodies decomposed, producing methane and hydrogen sulfide gas. Pressure built in sealed caskets until they exploded, sometimes launching corpses through cemetery soil. In 1838, London's Kensal Green Cemetery reported projectile coffin events where lids blasted open, propelling decomposed remains upward. Gravediggers developed superstitions about restless dead after witnessing nighttime eruptions. The phenomenon worsened with metal caskets, which held pressure longer before catastrophic failure. New Orleans cemeteries, with above-ground tombs and humid heat, experienced frequent explosions, showering surrounding areas with liquefied remains. One 1849 incident destroyed a tomb wall, spreading fragments across 3 neighboring crypts. Undertakers began drilling burping holes in caskets to release gases, but families objected to the implications. The practice only declined when embalming chemicals preserved bodies without gas production. Forensic analysis of exhumed remains from this era shows casket fragments embedded in skeletal material from internal explosions that occurred post-burial. The Sedlec ossuary in Czech Republic contains skeletons of 40,000 people artistically arranged into chandeliers, coats of arms, and wall decorations. In 1278, an abbot scattered Holy Land soil in the cemetery, making it Europe's most desirable burial site. During Black Death and Hussite wars, bodies overwhelmed the grounds, corpses stacked in charnel houses. In 1870, František Rint was hired to organize the bones. He bleached skulls, wired femurs into chandeliers, and constructed a coat of arms entirely from human skeletal components, including jaw bones for detail. The central chandelier contains at least one of every bone in the human body. Visitors report bones loosening and falling. A skull tumbled during a 2014 tour. Archaeologists identified bones showing battle trauma, plague lesions, and malnutrition. Some remains are children's, their small skulls clustered separately. The ossuary remains a functioning chapel where services occur beneath thousands of hollow eye sockets, forever watching from elaborately arranged death. Between the 11th and 19th centuries, Japanese Buddhist monks achieved self-mummification through a 3,000-day process called sokushinbutsu. They began by eating only nuts and seeds, eliminating body fat. Next came a diet of bark and roots with small amounts of poisonous lacquer tree sap, making flesh toxic to bacteria. Finally, they'd enter a stone tomb with only an air tube and bell, meditating until death while ringing daily to confirm life. When the bell stopped, the tomb was sealed for 3 years. Most attempts failed, resulting in decomposition, but 24 succeeded. Their bodies now displayed in Japanese temples. The Hanmyokai monk mummy at Dainichibo Temple still has skin, hair, and closed eyes. Analysis shows organs shrank, but didn't decay, preserved by urushi lacquer and tannins. The monks believed this excruciating death brought enlightenment and protected their community from disease, becoming eternal, seated guardians after their final breath. Venice's Doge's palace contained the pozzi, underground cells that flooded during high tide. Prisoners were chained standing, water rising to their chests twice daily, forcing sleepless vigilance against drowning for months. Stone walls, slick with algae, prevented grip as exhaustion set in. Records show inmates developing foot rot from constant immersion, flesh peeling away to bone. Some went mad from sleep deprivation, hallucinating rescue. The cells held no light except cracks and ceiling stones, allowing prisoners to track time by tidal rhythm. Jailers would occasionally find bodies still chained upright, drowned during sleep from one exceptionally high tide. Skeletons recovered during 19th century renovations showed shoulders dislocated from hanging by chains, teeth worn down from grinding during cold water immersion, and bone deformities from crouching in low-ceilinged spaces. The practice continued until 1797, when Napoleon abolished it after seeing the cells himself. In 1959, 9 Soviet hikers died mysteriously in Russia's Ural Mountains under circumstances that remain unexplained. Rescuers found their tents slashed from inside, bodies scattered across the snow in various states of undress, paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia victims feel burning hot and strip naked. Some had massive internal trauma, fractured skulls, broken ribs, eyes missing, though skin showed no external wounds. One victim's tongue was removed entirely, the soft tissue cleanly excised. They fled barefoot into -30 degrees Fahrenheit darkness, suggesting terror outweighed survival instinct. Radiation was detected on some clothing, and journals hinted at seeing strange lights. Theories range from avalanche, though slope angles don't support it, infrasound causing panic, military weapon testing, to paradoxical undressing alone. Bodies weren't found for weeks, preserved in ice, their faces described by searchers as expressing absolute horror, mouths frozen mid-scream in the Siberian darkness. In July 1518, Strasbourg witnessed 400 people dance uncontrollably for weeks, with approximately 15 dying daily from exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes. It began when Frau Trophea started dancing silently in the street, unable to stop despite bleeding feet. Within days, dozens joined, their faces blank, movements frenzied. Physicians believed hot blood caused it, prescribing more dancing to exhaust the affliction, constructing stages and hiring musicians. Historical records describe victims collapsing mid-dance, foam at their mouths, then rising to continue. Some families chained dancers to prevent self-injury as they thrashed against walls. Modern theories suggest ergot poisoning from contaminated rye bread caused psychotic episodes, or mass psychogenic illness triggered by famine stress and religious fears of divine punishment. The phenomenon ended as mysteriously as it began, leaving survivors with permanent tremors and psychological trauma, their bodies broken by weeks of relentless, involuntary movement. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 CE, Pompeii's citizens didn't burn. They suffocated in superheated gas reaching 570 degrees Fahrenheit, killing instantly before ash encased their final poses. Modern plaster casts reveal agonized positions. A man clutching his chest, a mother shielding her child, a dog straining against its chain as pyroclastic surges buried it alive. Archaeologists discovered voids in the hardened ash where bodies had decomposed, leaving perfect molds of death's exact moment. Some victims' brain matter vitrified, turned to glass, from the extreme heat, preserved inside skulls for 2 millennia. Analysis shows many had fractured bones from buildings collapsing as they fled. In the Marina Gate area, 300 skeletons huddled in boat chambers, believing the sea would save them, instead dying en masse as toxic fumes settled. Their bones still contain lead from water pipes, showing their last meal hours before extinction. During London's 1665 Great Plague, dead carts rolled through streets at night as collectors shouted, "Bring out your dead." These workers, often criminals pardoned for the grim duty, developed immunity through constant exposure to corpses. They stripped bodies of valuables before dumping them into lime-filled pits, sometimes tossing in victims who were merely unconscious. Archaeological excavations at Charterhouse Square revealed a mass grave containing 1,348 skeletons arranged in 5 layers, bones showing hack marks where collectors severed tangled limbs. The collectors themselves rarely survived beyond months, succumbing to exhaustion or the disease despite their immunity. Many drank heavily to mask the stench, dying in gutters. Parish records note collectors would mark homes with red crosses, sealing families inside to starve alongside their infected, a death sentence enforced by watchmen who guarded doors, ensuring no escape from the pestilence within.